Welcome to First Issues. The industrialization of the modern world has seen much development in businesses, better jobs, and increased economic activity around the globe. The widespread improvement in the quality of many of the world's populations has unfortunately gone hand in hand with an increased demand on natural resources. The planet is struggling to keep up. Increases in the average global temperature and the frequency of extreme weather events are transforming ecosystems around the world and threatening entire species of plants and animals. All of these are as a result of climate change. Is Botswana affected, though? While it may seem like these extreme weather conditions are only prevalent in other parts of the world, Botswana has definitely been a victim. Just recently, the country experienced drought that started in October of 2023, resulting from very little to no rainfall, coupled with extremely high temperatures of above 40 degrees Celsius. This leads to increased livestock mortality, low horticultural yields, further exacerbating food insecurity in the country. Furthermore, periodically the country experiences flash floods that are a nightmare for people who find themselves displaced. Perhaps the most common case was Hurricane Dineo in 2016. That was a result of a hurricane that started in Mozambique, a climate change aftermath. This all goes to show that the consequences of climate change affect all of us, but to adapt and react to these challenges, we must first understand them. On this segment of the show, we unpack issues around climate change, how Botswana has been affected, and how you, as an individual, can play a part in protecting the environment to minimize impact. We have here for this conversation Dr. Douglas Rasbash, Chairperson of the Botswana Climate Change Network. Dr. Rasbash, thank you so much for coming on First Issues and affording us your time. We're here today to talk to you about climate change and its impact on or in Botswana. So let's start first by understanding what is climate change.
Thank you very much for asking me that. Climate change comes about because the globe is surrounded by an atmosphere which should release its heat, but because there's more and more what they call greenhouse gases, it sort of creates like a tube effect around the planet. The heat simply can't escape. So many people prefer to use the term global warming as opposed to climate change, because climates have always changed, but what's happening now is that the globe is warming faster than it's ever done before because of trapping in these greenhouse gases.
Let us now talk about that in the context of Botswana. How has our carbon foot been like as far as contributing towards what we're seeing today?
Well, one has to be honest about this and say very little on a global scale, because we've neither produced fossil fuels nor have we consumed them in great volumes. So the countries that produce fossil fuels, like South Africa and Saudi Arabia and other oil, gas, coal producing countries, they've contributed big time. And the countries like the industrial north, America, Europe, and so on, China now, they contribute big time because they consume these fossil fuels. What Africa has done, and a little bit Botswana, is they've not made it any easier to cope with greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is breathed in by plants, trees. They need carbon dioxide, as you know, to grow, and they put out oxygen. So when countries such as Malawi, Mozambique, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, where I've been many times, and a little bit Botswana, we've lost a lot of that vegetation. So what we have to do, if we're not emitting it, we have to, try to keep viable our sinks for sequestering carbon dioxide.
I want us to move on to agriculture as one of the largest contributors to carbon emissions and climate change catalysts.
water resources, like you were saying, when in farming, and then carbon emissions from keeping animals. What solutions do you think could be presented, considering that agriculture in the country is one of the largest income subsidiaries for a lot of people?
Well, that's right. It does employ a lot of people, but its contribution to GDP is very small. It's an unreal, in a way, it's like so many other economic assessments, macroeconomic assessments, it's totally dominated by diamonds. I think to look at Botswana in a more pragmatic way, you take out diamonds, what's left? And then you're right, agriculture is a very dominant sector in the economy, but as it stands at the moment, it's only 2%. Very little, but largely because it's mostly informal. So if you include the informal economy, yes, it's much larger than 2%, you're right. Now, most of it is still subsistence farming, which we know. The last time I checked, there were about 50,000 registered farms in Botswana. And the number, by the way, is getting less and less and less. From independence, it was maybe 100,000. Now it's becoming smaller, but we are more productive. And that's the trend it should be. We need to do more with less, especially land and especially water. And that's the only way we're going to build resilience into the agricultural sector, is trying to do more with less. Very good example of doing more with less is, well, first of all, the Ministry of Agriculture a few years back started to train farmers to plant in rows instead of broadcasting seed, in a sort of random way, to actually use row planting techniques, and then drip irrigation, and not this type of sweeping irrigation, which uses huge quantities of water. So that's smarter, to try and use drip irrigation on things. But you can go a step further and not use the soil at all for some foods, like using something called hydroponics. The hydroponics is soilless farming, where things grow in water with nutrients in them. And quite a wide range of crops, even rice, can grow in water with nutrients in it very effectively. And there we use about 10% of the water that we would use to produce the same crops, cabbages, spinach, potatoes, onions, carrots, all the things that were in short supply because of the drought, because of the heat. That won't happen if we switch to the water smart farming like hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics. It's sort of part of the family. When it comes to livestock farming, which is our cultural heartbeat, shall we say, it makes everybody's heartbeat, You can use zero grazing and hydroponic fodder. It's very similar. Where you grow your grass or your fodder, it's grown hydroponically. And you hardly need any land. And like the crops, you need far less water. And the hydroponic fodder is higher in nutrition than soil-grown fodder. And of course, you can grow it the whole year round. And it's good for chickens and goats and cattle and pigs. And they all eat it. They don't just eat the greeny leaves, they eat the root as well. So it's very, very good.
Let us talk about emissions from transport, right? Our country is fast trying to work on our road infrastructure in accommodation of the larger or largely growing vehicular population in our country. How do you see that playing out, or how should it play out actually?
Well, that's a good question. There are many ways we can reduce emissions. It depends what objective you have. If your objective for transport is economic efficiency, that's one way of looking at it. The faster and the lower cost you can get from A to B, the better. But if you introduce an environmental element into your decision-making process, you get some very different solutions. All right? It's not necessarily economic efficiency, but it's in environmental efficiency too. But the bigger picture is we have the largest fleet of cars per capita in Africa. We do. It's even larger than South Africa. So we have over 600,000 registered vehicles in Botswana. 600,000 for 2.5 million people. It's far too many. And you say, well, we're busy building up infrastructure. We've already got far too much infrastructure. By any World Bank, by any objective criteria, the amount of paved road, this is road made with asphalt or tarmac as we say here, is huge compared to other countries with a similar population. Of course, we're hampered by long distances, but no, we are already pretty much saturated with as much paved road as we want. But the problem is, the more you build, the more traffic it generates, the more road you build. And so there's this cycle of building roads, more traffic, building roads, more traffic. So we have to stop, and we have to invest in public transport. And we have to really push that, because the environmental impact per passenger in a bus is very, very small compared to that in a car.
We're a population of less than 2.5 million people, and the majority of that actually, I don't think, know much about climate change. And to bring that knowledge about is something that would take possibly a lifetime to change that kind of mindset. I want to hear from you what you think could be a solution to that. Not talking about the much more sophisticated way of creating awareness.
Well, it has to start at school, I think, and it would be great if some schools had little hydroponics units. And I know when I was at school, we grew stuff.
Yeah.
And you maybe too. We had a little nature lab. We grew stuff. Look, you put the seeds there. This is how it grows. How did we do that? We had a jam jar with some blotting paper, and it grew. It didn't have soil in it, did it? So already unwittingly, we were growing things hydroponically. You see. Now that can be extended. You can get very small hydroponic setups, little tubes with holes in, and the nutrient solution winding its way down for very little money. See, when agriculture is taught at school, it's the old agriculture.
Yeah.
Well, then there's no hope of changing, you see, as if that is the only way to grow things. That can easily change, and I know that the basic curriculum is being revised. Well, let's really modernize it and put in environmentally sound solutions to these problems in the agriculture curriculum. We should do everything possible to minimize our consumption of resources, not maximize it. There's two types of economy. There's the cowboy economy and the spaceman's economy. Now, we're still into the cowboy economy. We burn and cut and roam the range, our cattle go everywhere, just like where these terms came from, North America. We think there's no limit to the land and resources that we have. We behave like cowboys. I think we can imagine very quickly what a spaceman's economy like, where everything is recycled, it's managed with great care, great resources. And we need to, despite being Botswana, a low population and a lot of land, we have to start thinking a little bit more like spacemen. Recycling our water, minimizing our consumption of resources and so on.